Well, hello everybody. Pastor Kevin here, bringing you some hopeful help for your community groups this week. So we're going to go through the chapter called Jesus and the Law, and it's on page 12 through I think 15 of your book. And let's just jump right in. After you've read the text, you should be able to get right into these questions. Okay. Question 1. When you feel unqualified or feel a task is impossible, do you typically stay silent and fight on to avoid judgment, or do you speak up? Why? So, again, icebreaker. It's kind of just one of those things to see there's different personalities in your group. There are some that will kind of be the ones who would just stay quiet, and there are going to be some who might say, hey, I'm not able to get this done. They might even ask for help or whatever. Maybe you can give some concrete examples or push people to, like why do they tend to bend that way and so forth. And it kind of gets us down into how our personalities can actually sometimes impact how we actually view Scripture. Sometimes we can actually, our personality starts to, it's the technical term is it's eisegesis. We start to take our personality and push it into the text, so we make decisions like, for example, when one of the ways of dealing with the Old Testament and the New Testament is to just kind of choose the Old Testament things that resonate with us, right? Our personalities. So you can see how some of that can happen, and that's not right either, right? But that means our personality is somehow deciding what text is important. So I think it's a good exercise. Okay, question number 2. When you hear law and prophets, what do you think Jesus means? Is he literally saying the 613 statutes and regulations in the first 5 books of the Bible, plus what those prophetic guys said? Or is it something different? What makes you come to your conclusion? This is just a way of us getting into when you see the law and the prophets written in the New Testament. Sometimes it'll be the law, prophets, and writings, or law, prophets, and psalms, those type of things. What the gospel writers are doing, sorry, I have a bug. Typically what the gospel writers are doing is they are telling you the Old Testament. They're basically saying this whole section of Scripture. And important thing to know is the prophets, when in the Jewish mind, when prophets was spoken, it doesn't just mean the prophets as we see them in our Bible. So that would be like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and so forth, right? Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and then the smaller prophetic books like Haggai and Amos and all of those. He's not, the gospel author isn't just saying those. There's actually something that they used to call the former prophets, which is like 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings and so forth. So those were seen as prophetic as well, even though we might call them history books. They consider that whole chunk prophetic work. So it's good for us to know that as you try to answer this question. And I mean, it's clear that Matthew's saying, like, these words from Jesus are the entirety of what you know of Scripture, right? He says that I have not come to abolish it, but to fulfill it, right? So, it's kind of a specific answer, but, have the discussion, see what people think about, when they hear law and prophets, what is it that they're looking at? And is it literally, is it talking about the content of the specific laws? Like, is it just like the 613 things such as, don't sell your daughters into prostitution, along with don't boil a baby goat in his mother's milk? Are all the, is that the specificity, or is there something greater being said here? Question 3. How does Jesus uphold the Old Testament in these few verses? Up until this point, how has Matthew also supported Old Testament scriptures? Give some concrete examples. We just the first question leads into this one, so you kind of have an idea. He is talking about the breadth of Scripture. But Matthew has also been showing how important Old Testament Scripture is, right? He's been, how many times, in fact, you can go back, the simple thing is go back and just look in the last 4 chapters, and you can find the specific Matthew's calling out and doing Old Testament allusions. Call them out. Say, clearly Matthew thinks the Old Testament scriptures are important too, and understand what he's doing, right? He's grabbing those texts to point to something, right? And I think that is super helpful in actually understanding what this Jesus and the law section is talking about. All of the law was pointing to something, and when Jesus says he fulfills it, that gets to our kind of our answers here. Okay. Question number 4. There are 2 uses of until in verse 18. Are they the same or different? So one is basically until heaven and earth pass away, and until everything is accomplished. I just want you to consider how oftentimes when something is written, there's parallelism where like they mean kind of the same thing. One might be an expansion of the other. This is kind of a thought exercise on what do you think, are these the same, or is it an expansion of it? Are they totally different? Are you saying 2 different untils? Just kind of gives you an opportunity to have a discussion about that. Question number 5. Jesus says he is not abolishing the law, but fulfilling it. Both abolish and fulfill imply something coming to an end, but in different ways. How are they different? How do you think we should look at the Old Testament based upon Jesus' words? So this is one of the hardest things that we don't wrap our mind around this very well. Because there are a lot of different ways that people have tried to connect Old Testament and New Testament over the years. And there's a lot of debate about it. There's the whole, you'll hear of the tripartite branches of the law. So people have tried to take the law and split it into the civil, ceremonial, and moral aspects. And what they'll say is that the new covenant is basically that the 2 have been abrogated, but moral law stays around. And while that's a super understandable system, it's not in there. If you read the law as you go through the Torah, you're like, they're mixed in. So how would you know which is which? Okay. And then, like I said before, sometimes our personality wants to just say, well, that can't apply anymore. That one, I don't like that one. Can't do that either, right? So this is getting to the point of abolish and fulfill are these ideas of coming to end. And Jesus is saying, I have not come to end it in the way of abolishing, but I am coming in the way of ending it, in fulfilling it. And this gets to the core of covenant. And there are covenants in the Bible. There are what are called unconditional and conditional covenants. So the ones you really need to be paying attention to here is the Abrahamic covenant, which is in Genesis chapter 12. That's where it begins. And you see this idea of Abraham is promised stuff from God. Yahweh tells him, go to this new land, and you're going to a foreign place. You are a pagan going into a foreign place, and you're taking me with you as your God. And Abraham's, like, his faithfulness that he took with him, God is basically saying, you don't need to do anything to receive my grace. I am promising you that your family will be a blessing to the whole earth. Right, that all peoples will be blessed by you. There's other promises of children, right, like the stars in the sky and the sand of the shore. And you'll see these that go along through Genesis, the Genesis account of Abraham. That is a unconditional covenant. God is saying, I'm doing this for you. And you might even remember, and it may be spoken of in the sermon as well, the idea of Abraham. There's a moment where God puts Abraham to sleep, and these animals are cut. Abraham had cut these animals in half, and normally in a covenant ceremony, as you would walk, as the 2 people cutting the covenant, you'd walk through these animals together, and it's basically saying, if you do not follow this covenant, that should happen to you. You should be torn apart. You should be undone. Okay, so in that scene, there's a scene where Abraham is put to sleep, and God walks through those animals that have been cut up. And it's just this powerful moment where Abraham, if he was thinking about this cutting ceremony at all, the fact that he didn't have to walk through, God would like kind of just put him off to the side, and God goes through is super powerful if you understand what's happening here. And again, this shows this Abrahamic covenant is an unconditional covenant. Now, when you move to the Mosaic covenant, the Moses covenant, the one on Sinai, it is conditional, right? You can get to parts of the Torah where it talks about blessings and curses. And it's clear that when you follow this covenant, you'll be blessed. When you don't follow it, you will be cursed. And we know that the ultimate story within the Old Testament is Israel failed to follow the covenant, and they took punishment in the form of exile, right? They lost the promised land. So in the middle of this, when you think of Jesus fulfilling, as Jesus steps in and becomes the true Israel, he becomes the true human who we've already seen in Matthew so far. He's the one who could take the temptations of the devil and actually succeed and walk through them. And but at the end of the day, where we're not even there yet, he's the one who would do it perfectly. He would follow the Mosaic covenant perfectly, but yet would take the Mosaic punishment on himself. He would take the curses. There's scripture that talks about him becoming a curse for us, right? So when you understand that, you can see that Jesus fulfilling the law is him basically being what the law pointed to. The law had a purpose. It wasn't bad. It was there. Isaac often talks about it as a fence, where Jesus is the true master, the true teacher that it was pointing to all along, right? And this is saying that the law and prophets, all of it was pointing to Jesus all along. So when you read prophetic works and it's talking about where, I mean, here's a perfect example. Recently there was, in the John the Baptist story, there was talking about preparing of the way. And there's a section of Isaiah 40, and it talks about comfort, that things are going to be made right, that the way is being prepared, and everyone would see, all flesh would see the glory of the Lord. And you can see how this is pointing to, so the prophets are pointing to this one who would fulfill all the law and the prophets, okay? So you can walk through a lot. I gave you a lot of information there. Anyway, if you have any questions, let me know. I mean, it's a deep and rich thing, but many of us look at it incorrectly. It's not to say that the things that are being said here we shouldn't do. It's not, the Old Testament law is not gone. It says not one iota or dot, right? And the iota is actually the smallest Greek letter, but some would say that it's actually taking the place of a Hebrew letter, which is really small, the smallest one. Or when it says dot, you might have heard dot and tittle, but those are like the little things that would differentiate a Hebrew letter from another Hebrew letter, just a little marking. So it's basically Jesus saying is, no, this is all perfectly good and sound stuff. I have come to fulfill it, right? So there's a difference there. All right, question 6. Read Romans 9:30 through 10:4. How can Paul's word be read in light of Jesus's words in Matthew 5:17 through 20? So this is a moment where Paul is actually talking about righteousness of Gentiles and his brotherhood, his Jewish brethren. But it talks about Jesus being the end of the law. And what I just talked about in the previous section should help you kind of talk that through. Because the end of the law, it's not saying that, the law was bad and it's entirely been abrogated. But what's happened is Jesus, as we'll see as we go through the Sermon on the Mount, is he's telling us how we need to live. And it's nothing new. It's just the deeper sense of everything, right? You're going to hear about, anger and murder and lust and adultery, and how Jesus actually turns it up a notch. He's not taking it away. He's turning it up, because he's saying within your hearts, there's this, as said here, if you don't have the righteousness of the Pharisee and the scribes, then, that's what you need. And he's saying more than that. So things have been cranked up. But again, we look to the King who dies on a cross and gives us his very spirit to be able to live out these things, and his grace in the middle of those moments when we can't. Okay, here we go. Question number 7. Have you ever said to someone, "Do as I say, not as I do"? Why did you say it? How does Jesus speak to this in today's Matthew text? This is just, I don't know if you've ever said this to your kids. I know a lot of people do. I probably have said it at some point. I don't like it, but a lot of it comes down to this, is there's this part of us that we know what's right, but if we aren't doing it, it becomes a hard thing to tell someone else to do. And the best answer to this is look at what we know, not from just this Matthew text, but if you understand the entirety of the gospel, Jesus did it. He perfectly, the law and the prophets pointed to him because he perfectly achieves the law, and he lives the law out in its most pure way, right, perfectly. And all the prophetic work, all of it was pointing to him. So he doesn't say, do as I say, not as I do. He says, do as I say, and as I do. And we should, again, empowered by the Spirit, we should be able to say that to people as well, at least in the sense of, I'm going to try with everything I have to live a particular way. And while I might fail, God's grace is there, but I still have his teaching ahead of me. I still know what he wants me to do, and I constantly am trying to live that out. Not because it's what saves me, but I've been saved, and this is the type of person that I have been called to be. Okay. Question number 8. What is your biggest concern when you come across words from Jesus like these in Matthew 5:17-20? What can possibly resolve your concern? So when Jesus says the whole, for I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. That's strong, and it's hard. And it's good to have open conversation about this, and say, like, here's some of the challenges I have with this. I don't feel like, I do this all the time. And it's true, and it's true for all of us. But isn't that the point? That Jesus would come to perfectly fulfill the law on your and my behalf, on everyone who had come before. No one was able to do it, but Jesus does. He fulfills it, and he actually takes the curses upon him. So it's one of those moments where I think we can both understand how far we are from the bar, but also understand the grace that's been given as we are living our lives out in order to try to live out this kingdom life. And that's kind of, it bridges into the gospel motivation section, where I think we do look to the good news, and we remember Jesus, and we remind, he did it. He's empowered me to do it. I'm not perfect, but I am seeking his perfection in how I live. And through his Spirit, we were given the possibility to make the right choice, to do the right thing. So it's one of those ways I think we can encourage one another in that gospel motivation section. Encourage each other. Maybe you've seen someone live something well, you do something right, encourage them. Maybe you're seeing people that are failing at that. Exhort them. Remind them that they have a king who sacrificed himself for them and provided a way even in their failure. So it's like you hear this echo of Jesus's words in John to the woman at the well. It's like, so go sin no more. We all need to be reminded, go sin no more. We have a king whom we are representing in the light and salt and light passage just last week. There's a witness. We are to be lights, that we would actually be giving witness to the goodness of our God, right? Let our light shine before men, that they would see our good works and glorify the Father who is in heaven. Well, that's still a call. We don't just fall back and eat grace all the time. We don't just see all of our failures and say, God's got me. That's true. But we must feel the weight of our call, our vocation to actually witness to his goodness, and the weight of our King receiving the curses on our behalf, such that propels us forward into living rightly as much as possible. Okay? So anyway, I hope all this helps you. I know sometimes it won't. Apologize for the bug flying around my head. I am kind of like Pigpen and Charlie Brown. So anyway, may God go with you this week. May the Spirit reign in your meetings, and may you have great dialogue and sharpen each other.